Another Western Conference coach was fired within the last week. We'll talk about Craig Berube being shown the door in St. Louis and the Jordan Kyrou reaction to it. Plus, we'll also talk about Jake Oettinger's injury and how the Stars can manage to keep winning games. And naughty or nice, Christmas is on the way, and some teams are going to be looking at some coal in their stockings. We'll talk about all that and more on today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. We are your team every day.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is happening, everybody? Welcome into the Locked On NHL podcast. We are your team every day, and we thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen each and every day. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. On today's episode of Locked On NHL, we'll talk about the third Western Conference coach to be dismissed so far this season, Jordan Kyrou getting booed by the home fans, and Jake Oettinger, who will be out of the lineup for the foreseeable future for the Dallas Stars. All that and more coming up here on today's show. My name is Seth Toupal, host of Locked On Wild, and one half of the dynamic duo for your Western Conference Tuesday edition of Locked On NHL. Joining me, as always, is Nick Morgan of Locked On Predators. Nick, another coach, and this one happened, I think, it was either it was later in the day after we recorded last week's episode, and by that, I mean, it happened at like 11 o'clock at night. It happened after a latest in the string of consecutive losses for the Blues. And again, just like we've seen with the Oilers, with the Wilds, and now with the Blues, the head coach pays the price for the sins of the GM in roster construction. And St. Louis is just the latest case in a long string of, well, we can't fire the entire roster, so we got to do something, and so we make a change at head coach.
Yeah, this seems like the standard GM. Look, I know the roster's not good, but I have to do something here, like get a new voice in, just do something to kind of fire up this roster and see where it goes. I think the people that cover the Blues that have talked about this have kind of said what I feel about it before, where was it the right move to fire Berube? Maybe, yeah, probably. Like in terms of when you look at this team, when you look at the record, when you look at the expectations, yeah, it's probably one of those things where like Berube, firing him makes sense. Does Craig Berube deserve the blame for where the Blues are right now? That is probably not, or, you know, at the very least, maybe 25%. As you mentioned, Craig Berube is not the guy that locked in Colton Parayko, who's been really off his game this year, to a term all the way through 2030. He's not the one that, you know, in a year in which you kind of hope to rebuild, bring in Kevin Hayes on a big contract. You know, he's not the one that's locked in, you know, Justin Falk or Torrey Krug to contracts that don't get off the book for 5 more years. So, yeah, I mean, the team itself is bad. And it's not just that, you know, oh, these are a bunch of players that just aren't playing up to their potential. These are a bunch of, I think, ill-advised moves that are coming back to bite the Blues. And yeah, Craig Berube did as much as he could with them. Maybe another voice comes in there. Drew Bannister comes in and sort of is able to be like, okay, here's what we have. Here's what we're going to do to kind of fix this. But yeah, I don't know what you expected out of this roster.
Yeah, and it's been interesting too because I think the most polarizing figure on this Blues team is the one that arguably is most important to their success in Jordan Binnington, and he has been, at least numbers wise, he has been extremely hit or miss so far this season. He's had, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games in which he has allowed 5 or more goals. He has another 1, 2, 3, 4 in which he has allowed 4 goals. And then he has, he shut out the Tampa Bay Lightning. He allowed just 1 goal to the New Jersey Devils. So it seems like as the Blues go, Jordan Binnington goes. And so if you can get more consistent goaltending as a team, that probably would have kept Berube on the bench. And it's so weird because you think about him being the only coach to ever lead this team to a Stanley Cup championship. But at the end of the day, there have been, even as recent as last year, there were some rumblings that maybe his message had started to fall on deaf ears in that locker room. And I think one of the other central figures to the Blues' struggle so far this year has got to be Jordan Kyrou, who has he's not lived up to the expectations that were put on him to start the season. He currently sits with 6 goals in 30 games. He's got 21 total points in those 30 games. That's well below what is expected of him so far this season. He's shooting 5.9% on the year, and his reaction drew a lot of attention in saying, what do I care if Berube is gone? He's not my coach anymore, so we're just going to focus on what we have in front of us. And that drew a lot of booing from St. Louis fans.
Here's an honest question. Was anything he said like that bad? Like
No.
it's not like he said, I thank God Berube is gone, I wanted him out, or he was like, I was gonna ask for a trade if he didn't go. I mean, somebody asked him, it's just like, hey, what was your relationship like with Craig Berube? And he said, I don't want to talk about it. He's not the coach anymore, Like I didn't see like anything that bad, like him dancing on Berube's grave or anything like that.
No.
But I think what you heard afterwards was just, I think how St. Louis Blues fans feel about the struggles the past 2 years, where it's just a lot of top players not necessarily kind of living up to that old school Blues style of play and expectations. And, I think, Craig Berube, who is loved in St. Louis, like the Blues fans absolutely loved him, kind of getting the brunt of the blame for how the players have performed. We've seen that before in Nashville. When Peter Laviolette got fired, David Poile came out and said, look, I love Peter Laviolette. I think he's a great coach. It's more on the players who just aren't playing up to him. So I have to do something. That seems like it's what's been the story for the Blues right now. And like Jordan Kyrou is one of those guys where, last year, 73 points in 79 games, but then you look, he's minus 38. And that leads to, believe it's like, okay, what was kind of the Blues mentality when they won the Stanley Cup? Like defense, effort.
Yeah.
You think back on guys like Ryan O'Reilly sort of leading the charge there. Even Vladimir Tarasenko, with all of his faults, was able to go out there and play pretty okay, like a two-way game. It just seems like these are, I don't know, maybe the best way to describe it is, you have players who kind of want to play this new school style, this fast, up, down, high-paced hockey. And you have a coach in Craig Berube who's like, we need to do what's, got us success before. And it just seemed like a styles clash almost. And I think that's what kind of led to the situation. I think it's what led to a lot of the Blues fans' frustrations with players like Jordan Kyrou.
Yeah, I think style clashes is the perfect way to describe it. And so now you get a third straight team that has had the coaches gone bump because the Blues are 2-0 since. And so
and Jordan Kyrou has 4 points in those 2 games. So
it's worked in every instance in which it has happened. The Oilers continue to get a little bit of a bump. They're like 10 and they're either 10 or 11-6 since. The Wild are 7-3 and the Blues are 2-0. And now, those aren't the only coaches to have been fired. DJ Smith was just fired by the Ottawa Senators. There's something in the water this season in the NHL, which has led to all of these coaches being shown the door already, and we're not even to Christmas. There are going to be more, maybe not during the season, but there are going to be some more after, to say the least, which it's a lot of turnover. It's a lot of turnover for one season, but
for sure.
That's just how it goes sometimes.
Do you believe, real quick, because I know we're up against a break, but why do you think teams get that post-coach firing bump?
I think because it just leads to a wiping of the slates of the allegiances, because it seems like every coach has their guys that they go to war with in more situations than not. The Wild had several of those guys in the case of Dean Evison, and you get John Hines coming in, and it doesn't seem like any of those allegiances are the same as they were. And so I think by and large, you have players that have to show what they've got for the new guy in order to get themselves that consistent ice time. And so it's, well, geez, this coach might not have my back as much as the old one did. So I got to go out here and I got to pick it up a little bit if I'm going to be consistently played in a top 6 role that I want. And I think you see a lot of that. It's just this coach is going to have a different opinion of me than the old one did. So I've got to I got to put my best effort forth to get on the good side. It's like with a substitute teacher.
Yeah. No, 100% agree with that. Yeah.
So we go from that to big injury news for the Dallas Stars. Jake Oettinger going to be out for a hot minute. And so we'll talk about the ripple effect there as we continue today's episode of Locked On Wilds after Locked On NHL. I figured I was going to do that at some point.
Yeah.
But this is Locked On NHL. You get that from hosting 2 different shows. Locked On NHL. We'll be back with more after this. Today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. As the weather gets colder, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there is no better time to get in on the action. Nick, if you took the Seattle Seahawks last night to beat the Philadelphia Eagles, boy, did you have a fun time watching them come back and win that game thanks to Drew Lock and the game-winning touchdown pass. So maybe you had the Seahawks. Maybe you also had Jackson Smith and Jigba to catch a touchdown pass. That is one of the prop bets that you could have gone with. And then you double. You double down and you win huge thanks to the Seahawks being able to complete the comeback. Not only that, but you can also pick from a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to kick off the NFL season. Again, FanDuel.com/lockedon to get things started with the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Welcome back to today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. We are your team every day. Seth Toupal and Nick Morgan talking now about the Jake Oettinger injury. And this is a tricky one for the Dallas Stars because Jake Oettinger is one of the better goalies in the NHL. I don't think that is I don't think I'm breaking any grounds by saying that. But the Dallas Stars, I think we're seeing, have a pretty good system to be able to, if anybody's going to weather this type of injury, I think the Stars are equipped to do so because they just have this relentless offense with a ton of depth. And you go to Scott Wedgwood and you look at what he's done since he took over, and he just continues to give them some consistent play in the net. He gave up just 3 goals against the Seattle Kraken. The Stars come back and win in overtime. He gave up a couple of goals in basically the entirety of the game when he came in to replace Oettinger against Ottawa. Yes, they did lose the game to St. Louis in overtime, but 2-0-1 since Oettinger left the lineup. How do you think the Stars will be able to weather this loss of their goalie?
I think you hit it on the head there. Look, Oettinger is a huge part of the Dallas Stars, and he is a big part of why the Dallas Stars have been such a good team over the past couple of years. But you mentioned it, the way this team is built, this is a team that is designed to lose a key piece and still keep going. And, it's funny because you kind of mentioned, Jake Oettinger, that's a big, step down to Scott Wedgwood. This year, not really. Oettinger has struggled a little bit this year, just a .901 save percentage. Doesn't look as sharp as he's been the past couple of years, when he's had those monster, .930 save percentage seasons. And you look at the standings, and the Dallas Stars are still right up there on top of the, the Central Division. So that goes to tell you, look, Dallas is surviving arguably one of their best players not having a very good season, and they're still in first place. What can they be when Oettinger's 100%? What can they be when they get back to sort of his old school style? And I think you've seen it this season, and I think you're seeing it with Scott Wedgwood, is they're still finding ways to win games. The depth is crazy, Seth. 8 players with 20-plus points this season. I'll have to double-check, but I think that's the most of any NHL team, and Wyatt Johnston's 1 point away from making that 9. So there's just an insane amount of scoring on the Stars team. Their defense has been okay enough to, I think, stifle teams late. And I think the Dallas Stars are built to weather an injury like this.
Yeah, you look at, from a goals perspective too. I mean, you're led by Joe Pavelski with 13, but Robertson has 10. How about Matt Duchene? I don't want to cut open a wound here. Being the host of Locked On Predators, but he's got 10 goals. He's got 27 points on the season so far in 29 games. You've got Rupe Hintz with 10 goals. Tyler Seguin and Wyatt Johnston have 9 each, but then Mason Marchman has 10. This team scores a lot of goals, and so yes, you're maybe going to have to win games more in the 5-4 range as opposed to 3-2, 4-3. But if anybody's equipped to be able to do it, it's the Dallas Stars. And on the Duchene note, is that one of the better signings, if not the best signing of the offseason in terms of bang for your buck? He signed for $3 million with Dallas. And again, he's got 27 points in 29 games, 10 goals, and has been a huge reason that the Stars are off to the start that they are.
It's one of the best. I would argue his replacement, Ryan O'Reilly in Nashville, has been just as good of a bang for your buck signing as him. But you and I called it, Seth, when that signing happened. We're like, okay, this seems like the kind of a deal that's going to make Dallas, kind of take them from really, really good team to elite contender level. And so far, it has. And look, everybody's kind of saying, oh, look at Matt Duchene, turn around. Matt Duchene played this well in Nashville. Remember, he had 86 points 2 years ago. So it's not like, oh, he's, all of a sudden on this new team in turning it loose. It's just, I think the Stars are playing him a little bit different. There's a little less pressure on him. And I think the way that, Pete DeBoer in Dallas is rolling out the lines and, the strategy much different than, what John Hines was doing in Nashville. So the Matt Duchene that we're seeing in Dallas this season shouldn't really be a surprise to anybody who's watched Matt Duchene play over the last, 3 years, especially the 86-point season. I think just because of, how the tenure in Nashville ended, which, if you ask me, was kind of a mistake. I think a lot of people are like, oh, is Matt Duchene washed? Is he just going to be like a, highly paid, big name third line guy? And no, you're seeing he still has left in the tank, and he's got enough to be a game changer.
Yeah, he has been for Dallas so far this season. Now, Christmas is right around the corner, and so we're going to finish today's episode with our rendition of the naughty or the nice list. And so we've got some takes that we're going to fire off here. I've got a doozy coming up, and so we'll get into that as we finish today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. It's the holiday season, as Seth mentioned, and a lot of you may be going out of town. You may be going back to your hometown and want to catch your favorite hometown team play, or maybe you just want to give somebody some tickets under their stocking as a great Christmas Day gift. Either way, you're going to want to use Game Time. Game Time is the ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. This is especially good if you're going to a venue you're never really been to before. You can make sure the sight lines are good. You don't get stuck behind a giant pole or beam. And the all-in prices that show up when you check out show you your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal without all those hidden fees that just magically add $100 to your total when you go to pay. And the cool thing about Game Time is they have tickets on sale right up to the start of the event, even an hour after it starts. And they always have exclusive flash deals on deals for stuff like football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and of course, hockey. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Final segment of today's episode of the Locked On NHL podcast. Once again, we are your team every day. Seth Toupal joined by Nick Morgan today. And Nick, you came up with this idea to take us home today. And basically we're going to, we've come up with a few talkers, and we're going to decide whether they are likely nice or not likely naughty. And if you don't mind, I'll start because I have one that I don't think is being talked about enough.
I was told you had a doozy.
Okay, so here's my first one.
Okay.
Chicago's getting Macklin Celebrini, aren't they?
I don't know if you can deny the conspiracy theory if that happens. Look, I'm gonna say naughty.
Thank you.
I'm gonna say naughty just for the vibes. It can't happen 2 years in a row, can it? I mean, Chicago is in a great position right now to kind of be that team. Like somehow, like I was like, oh yeah, like the kind of I did not catch that the San Jose Sharks had passed them in the standings in terms of points.
Yeah.
So Chicago is dead last, but if you're going by recent history, there is a very strong history of the last place team not getting a top pick. So I am going naughty just because I don't want to think about it.
Yeah. San Jose going 6-2-2 in their last 10 games, I think that's a good way to get yourself out of the absolute dead last spot in the NHL. And the Ottawa Senators were trying their hardest to get there. They won't. But yeah, I would very much love to not see Chicago get a second consecutive first overall pick, because I think Connor Bedard is enough. And yeah, please don't do it again. Please.
Save some franchise players for the rest of us, please.
That's all I'm saying.
Here's one. Let's talk about another team out of the playoffs right now, Seth. The Edmonton Oilers are currently the best team in the Western Conference.
Wow. I mean,
8-2 in their last 10, and Connor McDavid is what, like 30 points in his last 13 games or something like that?
It's very hard to argue that. They just have so much ground that they have to make up. They're currently 11 points behind the Los Angeles Kings, and the Kings have a game in hand. But your question was the best team in the Western Conference right now.
Right now.
And so I guess I would have to agree, because the only other team that comes close is, say, Vegas or Vancouver, who are 7-1-2 and 7-2-1 in their last 10 games, and Edmonton is still 8-2 in their last 10.
Throwing out Nashville's 13-3.
I'll agree. I'll say nice. I'll say nice for this one. I think that is I think that's accurate.
Interesting. All right. What's the next one?
I'm gonna go to our beloved Calgary Flames.
Oh, are they beloved?
Well, they are currently 1 point behind the Arizona Coyotes for a wild card spot in this year's playoffs, and Nazem Kadri is trying his best to keep them afloat. Nick, the Calgary Flames will not only get into a wild card position by the end of the season, the Calgary Flames will be one of the top 3 in the Pacific Division by the end of the year.
Oh, you had me up until top 3 teams. For me, I am going naughty on this. Do I think the Calgary Flames can get it together and get into the wild card spot? Absolutely. The way they're winning games this year is weird, because Jacob Markstrom, although he's been better recently, still isn't, kind of the Jacob Markstrom from a couple of years ago. They don't have any 100-point scores like they had with Gaudreau and Tkachuk, but they're getting a lot of players doing just enough to kind of, keep it together. So I think this does scream a team that, they keep moving in the right direction. They're going to get in the playoffs. Do we think they're going to outrun Vegas, Vancouver, LA?
No.
Towards the end of the year? No. The only thing that I would say is Jonathan Huberdeau, who 15 points this year in 30 games. If that ever gets fixed, maybe we're talking about something different here. But as it stands now, no. They're playoff team, yes. Top 3, no.
Yeah, I'm not going to hedge. I'm not going to hedge any further. Any further than that. I have one more, unless you do.
I do too. It's a quick one.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
Fit in both. It's another playoff bet. The Arizona Coyotes will make the playoffs this year.
I'm agreeing. I'm going to say nice, because we all want it. I think we all want to see it. And so why not? I'll say that they do, because we were talking about it before the season even started, and I like to be right. So I'll say yes. I'll say yes. I agree.
Yeah.
That's a nice prediction.
A lot of depth on that team and some fantastic goaltending from Connor Ingram this year for them.
Yes, that has really led to them being able to kind of take charge of their own playoff destinies.
Yeah.
Okay, one more that I have. This is a doozy.
Let's go.
Cam Talbot is going to win the Vezina.
Oh. He's the best goalie in the West right now.
He's currently trailing Aiden Hill in a couple of key categories, but not by much. So Aiden Hill is leading the NHL in goals against average at 1.93. Talbot's at 2.02. Save percentage. Hill is at 933. Talbot is at 926. And from a wins perspective, Talbot has 13 and Aiden Hill currently has 10.
It comes down to this. Is the Vezina like the goalie that's the most valuable goalie to his team, or is the Vezina just the best goalie? That's kind of been the debate over the last several years.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going based on stats, Aiden Hill's probably got it. If you're going based on, best second half run or, person that's been most critical, that's Cam Talbot. I will go naughty on this just because I think Hill in Vegas has a better chance of keeping that up than Talbot does in LA.
Yeah,
not by much.
That's the appropriate response to that question, is that the staying power for this, the staying power exists in Vegas. This Kings team, I think, has played really, really well for what they are, but if there is something that's going to fall off for them, it's probably the goaltending. But hey,
yeah,
credit to Cam Talbot, who at the beginning of the season, what I should do is just go through and re-listen to every episode and just try to kind of get a win-loss mark for my stances on things, because I know I, for one, was like, Cam Talbot, can it work? Turns out
we're not Cam Talbot fans on this show.
No, turns out it has worked. Now, will it continue to work? That's the big key. But at least for now, the Kings feel like that was a nice list present for them, not a naughty one. So
yeah, for sure,
time will tell for that. Now, obviously, with Christmas happening before we get a chance to talk to you next week, Merry Christmas, and hope that everybody has a chance to enjoy the weekend with friends and family. And we'll be back with you again the day after with some, I think, countdown to the end of the year type content. We're getting that lined up, but we will have an episode for you on the 26th. So make sure to join us then. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, so you don't miss out on any Locked On NHL programming throughout the entirety of the week. And we have new episodes for you every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.